Let's do questions and answers. Just don't throw hard objects, okay?
I was checking to see if you catch that.
All right. You know the very first question I was asked at a debate last week? Now you tell me how, you tell me how are you going to answer this question? Do you believe, Congressman Akin, that life begins at contraception? I'm dead serious. That was the first question I got. You know, I guess the answer, well, it's not supposed to. Anyway, yeah. Questions?
Todd, I got a question
Yes, sir.
for you. I'm an FFL holder, and with this problem we have with the Justice Department in Washington, D.C. and Eric Holder, somebody in that department is responsible for violating federal firearms laws in
Right.
the country. I'm held to the standards that I'm under penalty of law, and I'm a hard time at losing my freedom if I violate these laws.
Right.
And so you do everything legitimately according to the rules. Somebody in the Eric Holder's Justice Department is not doing that. They're playing foul ball here. And there's somebody responsible for felonious behavior and criminal. This is criminal. There's been a Border Patrol agent killed down on the border. There's been Mexicans, thousands of Mexicans killed with these firearms that were under this walking program. How are we going to get to the bottom of this and find out who is responsible? And get rid of these people and put them where they belong, behind bars.
A guy that started in Congress the same time I did, Darrell Issa.
Yes.
Okay, he's working on that, and he is a guy. He's a Lebanese by background, millionaire by designing car burglary systems and stuff, and he is slowly going up the chain. And he's got Holder in his sights right now. And I asked him whether or not Holder's going to be invited over to testify. And so there's going to be a legal back and forth as they try to protect Holder. My gut is that Darrell Issa is going to get Holder on the witness stand before too long. Because the thing that's the thing that's particularly troubling about what you bring up, and that is, why did the people, we have the facts of what happened. The question is, what are these jokers thinking? What's the logic? How do you describe what they did with any particular logical reason? And it appears that the reason, from what we can see, is simply to discredit people like you.
Bingo.
That's what it appears to be.
They want to create a problem, and they're going to offer the solution, which is total disarmament of the population.
What you just said is the main operative thing that's happening over the last 3 years. We create an excuse to transfer money and power to Washington, D.C. Every single piece of legislation, let's take a look at it from what you just said, because you just hit the jackpot with that. Obamacare. Do you think the federal government's going to give you better quality health care than what you have now? No. Do you think it's going to be cheaper? No. So what's the logic of dealing with health care? We're trying to make better health care at a lower price if we can. But this bill isn't going to do that, is it? But what is it going to do? More money, more power to D.C., right? Let's go to the next bill. Let's pretend like we all turn green. We're all greenists, okay? That we're all worried about global warming. I'm an engineer. I'm not too excited about global warming. But let's say we were. And we want to design a bill to reduce CO2. Say we're honest. We want to reduce CO2 in America. Let's say we set a hefty goal. We're going to get rid of the equivalent of all the CO2 for every passenger car in America. So how are we going to write the bill? Simple. Just basically phase out 20% of the coal-fired electric plants and replace them with nuclear. So you go 20 to 40% nuclear. France is at 80%. You could do that if you just go from 20 to 40% nuclear, get rid of all the CO2 of all those passengers. Is that what the bill did? No. It does what? More power, more money to Washington, D.C. What was it doing? It was going to give D.C. basically building code authority. So if you want to build a wing on your house, I love working with tools, well, you've got to get the federal government to do a carbon footprint on the wing of your house and tell you how to build it. You have to, what type of materials you have to build it with. What's that got to do with CO2? Nothing. More power, more money to D.C. Last thing, Dodd-Frank. Same thing, supposed to deal with the big economic crisis. Did it deal with Freddie and Fannie that were the cause of it? No. More money, more power. And that goes to what I'm hoping you get to in the question, and that is why, because we see this massive economic crisis coming down on it, why is it that a whole bunch of people don't care about that? Is it that they're waiting to exploit a massive problem with more money and more power in DC? I believe so. I don't mean to answer too long your question. I should be crisp. I'll be quicker. You had your hand up.
Yeah, I believe the individual earlier when you talked about as far as concealed carry Missouri was Greg Jeffrey.
That's it. That's the guy.
And the organization at that time he was with actually kicked him out in 2003.
Who did?
The organization kicked Greg Jeffrey out of the organization, and a number of people here had been members of that organization. Basically, it's on the decline.
Oh.
People don't even pay much attention to it anymore.
Oh, you're the replacement guys?
We're the replacement.
Okay. Well, I love you guys if that because that your group really helped me get into Congress. And I think I've been pretty solid for you guys, okay? Yeah. I'm going to go to here and then behind. Okay. Yeah. Paul.
We're the Minutemen that you're talking about from the other organization. We're down.
Oh.
Screw you. We're leaving. Bye.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Well, it used to be MPS, it's now GCLA. But anyway, to my question, when you get up into the Senate, will you make a promise, vow, send these people to prison and have violated our Constitution repeatedly? Yes or no?
Well, I want to be iffy, but it isn't senators or congressmen that send people to jail, it's judges.
Yeah, but the Senate hearings keep them out of office. So
Oh.
then they go in on charges and then they go to jail.
I'm all for that. Everything I can do.
We've got to reclaim Congress.
Let's take a look at the U.S. Congress. Anybody been messing with it lately? Well, let's see. Going to war in Libya without congressional approval. Naming recess appointments when there's not a recess.
No budget.
No budget for 1,000+ days required by the U.S. Constitution. A certain health care bill that requires people to buy a product without constitutional authority. And now there's even more weird stuff going on in that. I mean, it's one thing after the other. And so...
Birth certificate. Open the borders and get more voters.
Yeah, okay, you got that too. So anyway, yes, the answer is yes. I think it's time for us to take the country back. And you know, there's some of us, a lot of people think, well, just because you've been in Congress, you're no good because a lot of stuff no good went on in Congress. But there's some of us in the minority been fighting our rears off, and we got a little smarter from being kicked about, you know? You know, we kind of know where the pressure points are.
To follow up.
Yeah.
You can't beat his bankroll. You can't beat his bankroll. Even if he gets reelected, we still need to reclaim Congress
You're right.
and throw these people out.
Out. Take it back.
Yep.
Take it back. The House is reason. At least it's Republican. I'm not talking conservative. I'm saying it's Republican. The Senate is liberal. That's why I'm running to get rid of Claire McCaskill. There are 4 seats that the Republicans have to take back the Senate. And to change Claire McCaskill, who is beatable, the Rasmussen poll a week ago had me 5 points ahead of her. To replace Claire McCaskill with me, that's a change. Because on all the big bills, she voted one way, I vote the other. Now she talks about everything under the sun, but the way she voted, yeah. Okay, question, yes sir.
I'm seeing on the internet that John Boehner is kind of soft on his investigation of Fast and Furious. What's your assessment?
Now I don't know relative to Fast and Furious what Boehner has had relative to that, so I can't answer that question. And I'm not going to answer the other front end of your question either, okay? If you don't mind, okay? Let's put it this way. Debt ceiling increase last summer. I was one of 66 Republicans that voted no. That was Boehner's proposal, okay? Yeah. I mean, there's difference between Republican and conservative. You know that. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
What year did you work for IBM, and where did you work? Did you work in Poughkeepsie?
No, I worked for IBM first of all in Worcester, Mass, which is where I went to engineering school, and then the office was transferred to Waltham, Massachusetts, and I had accounts mostly in the Massachusetts area. So, and I was there, I'm thinking 73 or something to 77, somewhere about 4+ years or so. Interesting thing was, the guy in my sales school class, he was a good salesman, married a gal in our class, I married a gal in our class, and we had him pegged, and we were right back in 70 that he became CEO of IBM. So Sam Palmisano was in my...
Yeah, I know Sam.
Do you know Sam? We used to play football together. He's a pretty good football player back then. Yeah, he could throw well, and he was very fast. Yeah, and he was a good salesman. Yes, sir?
Why are the Republican parties being so lax in attacking the statements made by Obama and such? I mean, he makes outright lies, he makes whatever, and nothing happens. I know the media is with him, but there's still a guy like yourself that stand up and say, wait, what you did with him, Mr. President, it's not true.
What the president did was take my statement that America is threatened by the cancer of stage 3 socialism.
And you're right.
And what he said was, some nutcase said that student loans are socialism. That wasn't what I said. What I said was the stage 3 socialism is the government sticking its big nose into a whole lot of stuff it shouldn't be putting its nose into, including student loans, which it chased all the private people out. And now they've got Congress deciding what should the student loan rate be. Oh good, let's just give them away for free. And then all the rest of us that didn't have a loan, we're supposed to pay for it all. That's socialism, you see. So anyway, so the president did that. Now the only reason that anybody paid attention was because of Fox News. Fox News played, here's what the president said, here's what Congressman Akin said. Okay? And you look at the two and you go, no, he's cheating, like you said. And so I got a chance to be on Fox News. If it weren't for them, there was none of the rest of the media that would touch that. Now, understand this. If you're just a plain old Republican congressman, what you want to do is get on national news, because all your friends will say, I saw you on TV, and that means you're really cool. Okay? Everybody wants to be, not in a scandal, but they want to be in TV. But it's not very easy to do that. You know, there's some people who are really good at it, and it helps if you're good looking too. So everybody says, well, why don't you get out and complain? Well, it's because the liberal media, the national media is very liberal, and they're not liable to listen to what you're saying, unless there's something, you know, sort of unusual that comes up. But Fox is different than that. But everybody says that, and I understand how you feel, but actually having been there, it's not that easy to get on any of those liberal programs unless they want to set you up to try and make fun of you. There was that one guy, what was he? Was it Chris Matthews, who's just completely over the top left from New York City or something? And he always says, because when you control a microphone, you can make other people look stupid. They start to say something, you cut them off and make fun of them, you see? And that's his trick. Well, there's this freshman congressman who had been watching this, and he was pretty steamed about it. So he got all ready, and Chris Matthews opens up, and he just rips into Chris Matthews and said, yeah, I know how you are about Obama. You get that little tingle up your leg. I guess that makes you feel good, doesn't it? Do you know what? This guy's, and Chris Matthews is trying to talk, and this guy just hammers and hammers on him, and he slams the phone down. Chris Matthews was steamed for a week because somebody beat him in his own game. It's tricky to do. Anyhow, let's see another question. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Is there a process, and would you support it, of removing a Supreme Court justice, especially the one that thinks that Africa has a better constitution than us?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, I didn't touch on everything that I could have as somebody. Obviously, if you elect somebody to the Senate, we have something to say about who goes in that court. And the answer is that people have those weird ideas that they pick up like viruses in some foreign country, you know, and then try to import them to our Constitution. No, I don't think so. First of all, what I would say is anybody goes in that court is going to defend the Constitution, not try and rewrite it. Okay? And in terms of impeaching justices, it's a good idea. The only trouble is you got to get you got to get 2/3 of the Senate, I guess, to do it. And so sometimes people, you don't have any guts to do it. Well, sometimes when you see it, you count the noses, you just know it's not going to go anywhere. People sometimes say, yeah, you should try and impeach Obama. And I said, that's a good idea, let's do it in November. You know, because you know what you got with Harry Reid in the Senate. We got 25 bills to help get the economy going again. They're all just sitting there dead. No budget for, what is it, almost 1,100 days now. Yeah, so some of it's the art of what you can do. You send us down, and guys like I got a bunch of buddies I hang out with, we just get as conservative and as strong as we can. We work our tails off. But you know, if you give us something like Obama, with Obama and a massive Pelosi majority and a 60-vote thing in the Senate, we're going to be paying for this deal for a dozen years now, for that one election. The hope and change election, it's going to be expensive. Yes, sir?
Watt and McCaskill have sponsored a bill to postpone any cuts in the postal facilities. But at the same time, they said something about allowing the health care for postal workers to be cut. Does that seem fair?
I don't know the details of that bill. And the postal system, the challenge with it isn't paying for itself. So people are struggling with how are we going to deal with that. But I don't know the details of that bill, so I don't want to give you an answer that isn't any good. It's not something that it's come across our desk that I've studied up on. Basically though, I'm just a fiscal conservative, okay? Now the postal system is actually constitutional, unlike a lot of stuff that we're doing federally, okay? But a lot of the stuff, I mean, that's why Department of Education, whoop, get rid of that one. Department of Energy. You know why the Department of Energy was founded?
Reduce our dependence.
Reduce our dependence on foreign oil. How well has that worked for us? Whoop! Up they go, out the window with you. Yeah, and a bunch of other departments, we could just get rid of them. Now, there's certain pieces like the managing the nuclear stockpile, you transfer that to defense or something. Yeah. Question down here?
Yeah. What is the constitutional crisis that might occur if Obama's legitimacy is challenged? His birth certificate.
Well, the birth certificate question, I think, kind of fits in the category of the impeachment idea. And my sense is that let's just say you had pretty much convincing proof that he wasn't a citizen. If you took it to the Supreme Court, my guess is they're not going to do anything with it. Because remember, these guys, they say they're not political, they're political, you know? And so I don't think that they would necessarily do anything with it. So really the chance to get rid of Obama is November. And from a practical point of view, yeah.
But it's a known fact that Obama is not a natural born citizen. His father was not a citizen of the United States. So he is not a natural born citizen, right off the bat, which the Constitution requires.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of other things about Obama too.
I know.
And what happened? The people voted for him.
I know.
They tried to take that to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court refused to hear it. Souter, John Souter.
Yeah. Well, you know, the Supreme Court also seated, what was it, Carnahan, and basically the person they were seating was a dead man, which you can't do constitutionally either, you know, yeah, I don't know. I don't approve of disregarding the Constitution. You know, the thing is, we all take an oath to uphold the Constitution when you become a congressman. When you're a president, you take an oath to uphold the Constitution. As far as I'm concerned, there's 3 branches that uphold the Constitution: the legislative branch, the executive branch, and judiciary. And if I were the president and something's unconstitutional, I'm going to say it's unconstitutional. Well, you're not the Supreme Court. No, I'm the president. I take an oath to uphold the Constitution. It's unconstitutional. I'll veto it.
That's our owner's manual.
Yeah.
That's all pure and simple.
Yep, you're supposed to follow it. You're supposed to follow it. Pretty good.
It's pretty inconvenient for the liberals, though, to follow the Constitution.
You know, it's just a living, breathing document. You know. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Have you ever seen a president who disregarded the judgments of the Supreme Court? Just don't enforce them. Just say, I don't like that, so we're not going to do anything with that.
Andrew Jackson did it.
That's happened at various times. the president said, I forget some of the historic examples, the president said, well, yeah, that's what you ruled, now how are you going to enforce it?
That was Andrew Jackson.
Was it Andrew Jackson was one of them? It happened more recently too, though, I think. Who was it? I don't remember offhand, but that is the point. See, the Supreme Court, it doesn't really have any power unless it loses its credibility. I mean, its power is only in its credibility. And if they're too weird and people just ignore it, you know.
It comes down to Rahm Emanuel enforcing it, right?
Yeah, that's a scary picture. Yeah, yeah. Yes, sir.
The Supreme Court said Jackson couldn't relocate the Indians. He said that's fine, let them enforce it.
You've got some great historians here. You guys are tough. Good deal. All right. Yeah, I think you're right. Is that what you're referring to? Same thing? Andrew Jackson. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Here's my concern. This economic crisis is not subtle. I mean, sometimes we slip into a recession, people didn't see it coming. This thing is about as subtle as a battleship running into a dock. Putting it in the level of let's get rid of, I think it's 9 zeros out of the budget. Let's talk about what it means if we're talking about your family. You're making $21,700 a year. You're spending $38,500 a year. That's not a good way to start your family to begin with. So you got $16,500 of deficit per year on $21,700 all you're making, and your credit card is $143,000 in debt. And you're arguing with your wife about cutting $380 from something. That's where we are. That's where we are. That's just one way of saying it. The other way of saying it is think of everything the federal government does that you think of, it's all debt. Now, you got this massive economic mess coming down the pike, and it appears there's a whole bunch of people in elected office, including a president, that doesn't seem to be very serious about dealing with this thing. Is it possible they remember Rahm Emanuel, who said, don't let any crisis go? Don't waste a good crisis. And so the dollar bill all of a sudden doesn't work anymore, and what's the gamble? We're going to get what? More money and more power in D.C. Because that's what happens every time. Civil War was the first time where the federal government grew massively. And wherever there's a crisis, people always give more power and more money to D.C. And I think that our opponents are gambling on that happening. And that's I believe I think that's the checkmate move, and I think our job is to stop checkmate. Yes.
Just as kind of a guy who's got his ear to the ground and his eyes open. What I've seen in the last 3 or 4 years is internationally there have been all of these, basically I think they're communist slash Islamic revolutions going on across the entire planet. And there's only been one revolution of sorts, and they've all been peaceful, relatively. That was not against the government or against the ruling class. And that was the Tea Party. Amongst the whole entire planet, the Tea Party was the only group of people who were standing up for the government and supporting the government and asking the government to do what is right, as opposed to every other organization and group trying to tear it down and remake it. And who's the enemy of the Tea Party but our Democratic people in positions of power now? So I think that basically there's a serious, almost melding of evil intent between our local boys and the international guys.
Particularly, I worry about it, and that's why I'm a co-sponsor of Ron Paul's Audit the Fed bill. How much are we gambling on the European economy? I'd like to know. You know. Now you've asked me questions. You just got me sparked up. Now I get to ask you a question or two because we got some sharp guys in here. There was the American Revolution, the French Revolution, and the Russian Revolution. Why was it that the American Revolution ended in peace and the creation of America, and the other two revolutions ended in total chaos and the loss of huge number of lives, and they didn't work worth a hoot? That's a question a Chinese, high-level Chinese guy asked an American. And I just want to see, it's a trick question. I want to see if you're on your toes today. Who's going to be first? You're first, you're going to be second, yeah?
Probably the same reason that the Japanese said that they weren't going to invade the U.S. and the Russian, the Soviet Union also said. Because there'd be a gun behind every blade of grass with someone knowing how to use it.
I'm going to go a different direction on you. You're next, and then I'm going to come over here.
Religious component. Yeah. We're the only group of people who basically determined in our definition of ourselves that we believe in a God, a singular God, and in the year of our Lord. And I'd say it was the Christian component that basically solidified.
I think you're right indirectly. I totally agree with that, but I'm going to turn this round again a little different way, but I'll give you another chance or two. This question was legitimately asked by a high-level Chinese guy to an American who didn't give him a very good answer. Yeah.
Well, I was approaching it from the flip side. The French Revolution, the Russian Revolution were atheistic.
But that's true. But here's a different way of looking at it. If you think about it, I just cheated with the question. The American Revolution was not a revolution. It was a war to maintain an existing civilization that had been built over 170 years. They were just throwing the king out of the equation. Right. But they were trying to keep the same government, the same states, the same legislators that they'd always had. So it really wasn't a revolution. It was a war to protect what the government that they had already set up.
The rights of Englishmen. They said they were actually they were the rights already of Englishmen in Britain. They were the rights.
Yeah, it was. So whereas the French Revolution was a revolution to destroy the government, the same as the Russians. Right. So I think it's kind of an interesting point. Certainly Christianity was a huge piece of it, okay? But I think it is interesting to note, see, that from the day of the Pilgrims concept was that a group of free people under God was going to create a government to be their servant. Remember, Europe was still divine right of kings. So from the day of the Pilgrims all the way up to the War of Independence, America had been building self-governing communities and states. They had a system of law, which they basically borrowed was British common law, and it was Puritan theology that created our Constitution. So America was pretty unique, but the founders were fighting to keep what they had, and to get, because the king was trying to disrupt it. And so anyway, your question was a great question, but I thought of, anyway, little history thing. One more you think?
I'm the last. No, I'm nervous. No, one thing you said about the United Nations, I recall that when the Russians were disgusted with the United Nations and they took their game ball and went home in the early 1950s, then they did not have their way in the Korean War. They lost immediate influence, and we prevailed, and the South Koreans were supported. So to pull out of the UN without having another plan could risk something like that occurring, likely will. I think a better solution is for the United States to lead formation of a new United Nations of democracies and call it the real United Nations, or RUN. And something of that ilk. Don't even talk about reforming the old. Lead the new, because the democracies are the ones with the power, the economic power, and the state power long-term to make it work. And if you are not a democracy, or if you are a thugocracy, or in a kleptocracy, or any of these things, you don't qualify to be in the room, period.
That's a good point. When I first went to Congress, I saw President Bush, and it seemed like he was using the United Nations in a positive way because we were one of the 5 people that started it and had certain privileges. I guess somewhere along the line, I crossed over to the point that the threats of the Treaty on the Child, the Sea Treaty, the Agenda 21, the threat of an international treaty trumping our Constitution became greater than the benefit that the UN had. Plus, the whole deal with the oil and the scandals of the UN and their just hypocrisy on human rights and everything. Finally, I just said, because you see what you're saying, but my feeling was that the threat of us sometime along the line in the Senate actually agreeing to one of those dumb treaties may be worse than the benefit. But certainly that's positive to say we're going to create a union of free nations and sort of start a club over again.
Every now and then, audacity works.
Yeah.
It would be one of those that would work. And actually, all we would need to do is take over the existing facility. and kick them out. Put them in cabs on planes home and say, you don't represent anybody but your own interests. We are the real United States. And you have a lot of empty office space.
Maybe we could rent it out, make some money. Well, I don't want to go too long because I don't know what your normal schedule is. I'm happy to sit here and chew the fat a little bit longer if you want. You want to do one or two questions more or not? Get one more? Okay.
One of the underlying problems of all of the problems that we've discussed tonight is that we have an entitlement society. And the Bible tells me if a man does not work, he shall not eat. Well, we've got a society that says if you don't work, we'll pay you.
If you have an illegitimate child, we'll pay you.
Right. Is there a way to address that? Is that too controversial or?
November. Yeah. The trouble with this kind of thinking is as soon as you get socialism going, it's very hard to stop it. Because everybody gets feeling like they're entitled to something. You know, that's the deadly thing about it. And what's happening is the more the government gets involved in different areas, nobody wants it to stop. And politically, trying to stop those things is really, really tough. But
one more question.
Yeah.
We'll move along.
One more question? Okay.
More question.
Yeah. Anybody got the last one or not? Okay. Thank you all. God bless you. Thanks for letting me.